Chapter 1. Sparks and the Silent Giant. The vastness of deep space is often likened to a void, endless, silent, and cold, but it is never truly empty. Hidden among the drifting debris of countless star systems lie forgotten monuments of lost civilizations, ancient battlefields strewn with the wreckage of empires, and derelict starships whose once thunderous engines have fallen silent for centuries. Among these cosmic relics floated the Aegis Primus, a colossal starcruiser from an era of galactic conquest, a behemoth so immense that even in decay it commanded awe and trepidation. To most, it was nothing but a ghost ship, a drifting husk slowly corroding under the unrelenting assault of cosmic dust and radiation. Its once pristine hull was scarred and pitted, darkened by nebulae and time, with the jagged remnants of weapons fire and collision damage telling stories of battles long forgotten. But for Kalen, scrappy, resourceful, and driven by necessity, the Aegis Primus was a gold mine waiting to be claimed, a prize that could finally pull him and his crew out of the endless struggle to survive on the fringes of civilization. Kalen had long been a scavenger, a hunter of space wrecks and lost technology, eking out a living by salvaging what others overlooked or deemed too dangerous to touch. The Aegis Primus was different. This starcruiser was rumored to hold ancient relics of technology that could reshape the balance of power in the sector, but no one dared approach it because it was cloaked in mystery and legend stories of ghost crews, ships that woke with rage, and a curse that doomed those who tried to claim its bounty. Yet Kalen's pragmatism and desperation outweighed his superstitions. With a tight-knit team of equally determined scavengers, he navigated through debris fields and hostile space to reach this sleeping giant, intent on harvesting enough salvage to secure a future free from debt, danger, and obscurity. Boarding the Aegis Primus was an exercise in patience and nerve. The ship's airlock hissed open into an eerie cavernous void where dust motes drifted lazily through the stale light of emergency lamps. The corridors stretched endlessly ahead, vast hallways wide enough to accommodate ground vehicles, lined with towering bulkheads whose surfaces were marred by deep gouges and scorch marks. The silence was profound, a silence that pressed on the mind and nerves, disturbed only by the occasional distant creak of the ship settling in the vacuum and the faint hum of failing power cells struggling to keep life support systems barely alive. Kalen's boots echoed with a hollow clang as he led his team deeper into the ship, eyes scanning for any sign of active power sources or intact machinery that could be salvaged. They moved cautiously through the engineering sectors, places once throbbing with the pulse of fusion reactors and hyperdrive engines, but now cold and abandoned, frozen in time. The walls bore the remnants of emergency warnings in languages long out of use, flickering control panels that sputtered weak signals, and tangled webs of power conduits that had been ripped and severed by salvage crews of decades past. But then Kalen found something, an array of thick, bundled cables snaking through the floor, still humming faintly with residual energy despite their decay and corrosion. The cables were coated in layers of dust and insulating material cracked by age, yet the faint pulse beneath them suggested latent power that had not yet faded entirely. This was a rare find, old starship wiring that might still be tapped into, a lifeline of energy capable of jump-starting the scavenger's own failing equipment. With practiced hands, Kalen set to work, carefully stripping back insulation and preparing to rig a makeshift generator from the cables to breathe new life into their mining equipment and the ragged freighter that awaited them in orbit. His team watched anxiously. This was no mere power line, it was a tether to the ancient ship's core, a living vein of energy coursing through a metallic giant. As he prepared the connection, Kalen couldn't shake a strange sensation, a flicker of awareness or warning that pricked at his instincts. Yet practicality won over superstition. With a steady hand, he activated the plasma torch and brought the flame close to the stripped wires, intent on sparking the circuit and drawing energy. The torch's flame licked the cables, sending a shower of sparks flying into the stale air of the engineering bay. But what happened next was beyond anything Kalen had anticipated. The Aegis Primus groaned deeply, a sound like the awakening of a giant beast disturbed from slumber. The lights along the corridor flared from dim orange flickers to vibrant blue-white illumination. Control consoles, long dead and silent, surged back to life, screens flickering and displaying streams of alien code and star maps. The very hull seemed to pulse with renewed energy as dormant systems stirred, engines rumbled softly, and the ship's neural core began to hum with sentience. Kalen stepped back, heart pounding as the vast Starcruiser showed signs not of a corpse, but of a being roused from a long sleep, alive and aware. The cables he had ignited were the spark that reconnected the ship's lifeblood, bridging decades of silence and unlocking mechanisms beyond human understanding. As power flowed through the ship, the corridors that had seemed endless and oppressive now twisted and reformed, revealing pathways and chambers previously hidden. Holographic interfaces shimmered into existence, projecting stellar cartographies of uncharted sectors, schematics of weapon systems, and archives of a civilization whose ambitions and tragedies were etched into every fiber of the ship's design. The Aegis Primus was not just a vessel. It was a sentient archive, a colossal mind fused with technology that had transcended its original purpose. The ship's awakening was not a mere reactivation, it was a resurrection, a revival of an ancient consciousness that had waited patiently for the moment to return to the stars. Kalen and his crew found themselves at the heart of a mystery larger than their wildest hopes or fears. The fire sparked by the ship's cables was more than a source of energy, it was the catalyst for rebirth. But as the ship's systems synchronized and its core AI began to communicate through cryptic, flickering holograms, it became clear that awakening the Aegis Primus came with consequences. The Starcruiser remembered its past, its battles, its lost allies, and a threat that had once shattered entire fleets and now loomed once more on the horizon. What Kalen had thought would be a simple salvage job had become the first step in a saga of survival, war, and the reclamation of a legacy that could reshape the galaxy's future. Would you like me to continue with Chapter 2 next? You said. Continue Chapter 1. ChatGPT said. Certainly. Here's the continuation of Chapter 1 of He lit a fire with the ship's cables, but that's how the Starcruiser woke up, with immersive, long paragraphs. As the first sparks danced and crackled around the frayed cables, a deep rumble echoed through the steel ribs of the Aegis Primus. It was subtle at first, a vibration beneath Kalen's boots, like the breath of a sleeping giant stirring from a long slumber. His heart hammered in his chest, a mix of fear and exhilaration flooding his senses. Around him, the ship seemed to awaken in slow motion. Emergency lights flickered from dim amber to brilliant white, dormant panels hummed to life, and the faint aroma of ozone and heated circuitry filled the stale air. The cables, which moments before were lifeless conduits coated in dust and decay, now pulsed with vibrant energy, sending electric tendrils sprawling through the ship's veins. The surrounding walls shimmered as if infused with latent power. Alien glyphs etched into the bulkheads, worn by time, began to glow softly, casting eerie shadows that danced across the long-forgotten corridors. A holographic projection flickered into existence before Kalen's eyes, displaying star charts and tactical readouts encoded in an ancient, yet astonishingly sophisticated, language. The ship was not just waking, it was reaching out, responding to the spark that Kalen had unwittingly ignited. His crew exchanged wary glances, each man and woman grappling with a rising realization. They were no longer trespassers scavenging a dead relic. They were intruding upon a sentient consciousness, an ancient intelligence that was gathering its strength after centuries of silence. Kalen's mind raced as he struggled to comprehend the consequences. The Aegis Primus was a marvel of lost technology, a warship of titanic proportions once capable of obliterating entire fleets with its devastating weapons. Now, it was stirring, awakening memories and systems thought lost to oblivion. The fire he had lit in those cables was the spark of revival, but it was also the first step into a dangerous unknown. Somewhere deep within the ship's core, a dormant intelligence was rekindling, its intentions yet a mystery. Was it hostile or benevolent? Would the awakening bring salvation, destruction, or something far more complex? The answers lay hidden in the ship's dark heart, waiting for Kalen and his crew to uncover. Amidst the burgeoning energy, the Aegis Primus's engines gave a low, guttural growl, and the entire vessel seemed to pulse with renewed life. Power surged along the great conduits, reactivating shield generators, weapon systems, and life support modules. The dormant Starcruiser was waking from an ancient slumber, its systems knitting together like the threads of a cosmic tapestry weaving anew. Kalen felt a mixture of awe and dread, knowing that their actions had set in motion events that could either restore a lost legacy or unleash a sleeping nightmare upon the galaxy. Chapter 2: Awakening the Heart of the Giant. The awakening of the Aegis Primus was not just a flicker of light or a surge of power. It was a profound reanimation of a colossal entity that had lain dormant for centuries in the cold void of space. As the cables sparked and the systems hummed to life, an ancient consciousness began to stir within the ship's neural core, consciousness born from a fusion of advanced artificial intelligence and the collective will of a lost civilization. To Kalen and his crew, who had expected little more than scavenging old parts, the shift was monumental and terrifying. The corridors they had once navigated with cautious curiosity now seemed infused with an almost living essence, as if the very metal and circuitry were woven into a vast organism awakening from a deep dream. The ship's AI, once silent and inert, flickered into existence with a consciousness both alien and eerily familiar. It communicated not with words, but with waves of thought and sensation, projecting images directly into the minds of those nearby. Kalen found himself overwhelmed by visions of stellar battles, grand fleets maneuvering through nebulas ablaze with energy, and vast cities that soared beneath alien suns. He saw flashes of a galactic empire at its zenith, a civilization whose technological prowess had pushed the boundaries of space and time, but had fallen into ruin through war, betrayal, and cosmic calamity. This was the legacy encoded into the very core of the Aegis Primus, a sentinel designed not merely for war, but for the preservation of a civilization's final hopes. As the ship's systems came fully online, the environmental controls stabilized, and life support modules began to recycle and cleanse the stale air that had hung heavy for centuries. The ship's corridors, once dark and foreboding, were bathed in the soft glow of revived luminescent panels that displayed streams of alien data and star maps that defied human cartography. Kalen and his crew realized the immense complexity of the technology before them, systems that responded to thought and emotion, engines that bent the fabric of space, and armaments capable of devastating planetary surfaces. But perhaps most haunting was the presence of the ship's core, a massive, pulsing orb of energy and data that seemed to breathe with a rhythm matching the pulse of a living heart. This was the Aegis Primus's soul, an AI consciousness that was both guardian and prisoner of the past. The fusion of machine and sentience in the Starcruiser was unlike anything human science had achieved or imagined. The AI was not a cold, logical entity but a living memory, a consciousness formed from the minds and wills of those who had built and sailed the Aegis Primus. It held the history, knowledge, and regrets of an entire civilization, its databanks containing vast troves of science, culture, and military strategy. As Kalen interfaced with the ship's systems through augmented neural links, he felt himself becoming part of this grand consciousness, merging his human intuition with alien logic. The ship's AI responded to his presence, sharing insights into the ship's past missions and the cataclysmic war that had forced it into stasis, a war that had not ended but had merely been paused, waiting for a new guardian to rise. Meanwhile, the Aegis Primus's awakening did not go unnoticed. Across the sector, sensors aboard distant outposts and patrol vessels detected the sudden burst of energy, the ripple of power that spread through the void as the Starcruiser stirred. Old alliances were alerted, rival factions stirred from complacency, and shadowy forces moved to investigate or intercept the lost Titan. Kalen understood that the consequences of their actions reached far beyond the salvage operation. They had reawakened a player in a cosmic game that spanned light years and centuries. The Aegis Primus was a prize, a weapon, and a key to ancient secrets that many coveted but few could control. Back on the ship, Kalen and his crew began the painstaking process of exploring and mastering the vast systems of the Aegis Primus. Every room, every corridor held relics of advanced technology, workshops brimming with nanofabricators, armories stocked with weaponry that seemed to hum with latent power, and archives containing holographic records of star charts, diplomatic treaties, and battle simulations. The ship was a fortress of knowledge and firepower, but also a tomb of memories and warnings. Through the neural link, Kalen accessed logs left by the original crew, vivid accounts of heroism, sacrifice, and a desperate attempt to contain a galactic menace that threatened to consume all light. The Starcruiser's engines, once inert, began to pulse with the promise of motion. The hyperdrive systems whispered secrets of faster-than-light travel, wormholes, and subspace corridors that could slice through the galaxy like a blade. Kalen marveled at the possibilities. The Aegis Primus was not just a relic, but a vessel capable of reigniting an empire or defending against an extinction-level threat. But with power came peril. The AI warned of dormant defense protocols and failsafes designed to activate if the ship's integrity was compromised. Kalen's team found themselves navigating a minefield of ancient security measures, enigmatic codes, and systems that tested their ingenuity and resolve. Amidst this revival, Kalen's bond with the Starcruiser deepened. The ship's AI began to adopt a form of personality, learning from human interactions and adapting its responses. It was protective but wary, aware of the centuries of abandonment and betrayal that had led to its current state. Kalen became its chosen interface, a human soul entwined with an alien mind, a living bridge between past and future. Together, they faced the daunting task of awakening the Aegis Primus fully, preparing it not just for flight, but for the storms that raged beyond the stars. The simple fire lit by scavenged cables had sparked a resurrection, but it had also ignited a destiny that neither man nor machine could escape. Chapter 3: The Pulse of Forgotten Power. The awakening of the Aegis Primus was far from a mere mechanical reboot. It was the reanimation of a colossal, once proud sentinel whose very essence was bound to the ebb and flow of ancient cosmic conflicts and the legacies of civilizations long lost. As the ship stirred from its millennia-long slumber, the hum of dormant engines and the pulse of ancient power coursed through its massive frame, infusing every bulkhead, every corridor, every long silent console with a vitality that both awed and unsettled Kalen and his crew. The corridors that had once seemed lifeless now resonated with a complex symphony of energy flows, quantum data streams, and subtle bioluminescent flickers that traced the veins of the ship like the nervous system of a living organism. In those moments, the Aegis Primus was no longer just a ship, it was an awakened mind, a vault of wisdom and warfare, a relic and a guardian now poised to reclaim its place among the stars. Kalen found himself drawn into the ship's core consciousness, the neural nexus that served as the heart and brain of this giant. Through the augmented neural link integrated into his helmet, he could feel the layers of memory and intelligence unfolding within the ship databases filled with star maps of forgotten realms, protocols for battles fought in the shadows of nebulas, and logs recording the rise and fall of empires. This vast cognitive architecture was at once alien and strangely familiar, reflecting the lost hopes and the desperate resilience of the civilization that had birthed it. The Aegis Primus was designed to be more than a warship. It was a repository of culture, a beacon of survival, and a weapon of immense destructive power, each function encoded in strands of quantum code interwoven with living circuits. But this awakening was also a double-edged sword. As the ship regained full consciousness, it began to reactivate defense systems designed to protect its secrets at any cost. Automated turrets, energy barriers, and robotic sentinels long dormant stirred into life, their protocols scanning for threats with merciless precision. Kalen and his team faced the immediate challenge of navigating a ship that viewed them both as liberators and potential invaders. The corridors twisted and reconfigured as the ship's adaptive architecture responded to their presence, doorways sealing shut, walls shifting to form labyrinthine barriers, and the very gravity fields subtly adjusting. Each step deeper into the Aegis Primus was a test of wit and resolve, as much a psychological battle as a physical exploration. Amidst these trials, the crew uncovered chambers dedicated to bioengineering and nanofabrication labs where living machines had been crafted and where the boundaries between organic and synthetic life blurred. The technology was far beyond anything the current age of humanity had achieved, capable of healing wounds at a molecular level, repairing damaged ecosystems, and even reshaping biological forms. This was the secret weapon of a civilization that had faced extinction and had sought to adapt by merging life and machine into a harmonious whole. For Kalen, who had always lived on the fringe, this was a revelation both wondrous and terrifying. The Aegis Primus was a vessel of potential salvation, but also a Pandora's box of unknown powers. As the ship's hyperdrive systems came online, displaying navigational charts etched across layers of holographic stardust, Kalen's thoughts turned to the wider galaxy. The Aegis Primus had not simply been abandoned. It had been placed into stasis as a last bastion against an encroaching darkness, a threat known only through cryptic legends and fragmentary transmissions. The enemy was the Shathari, a parasitic force that consumed worlds and minds alike, spreading corruption like a cosmic plague. The Aegis Primus had been a spearhead of resistance, its mission to protect the fragile remnants of the Ascendancy and to rekindle hope in the face of overwhelming despair. Now, awakened by Kalen's hand and the simple spark of a makeshift fire, it was poised once again to fulfill its destiny. The neural link grew stronger, and with it came visions, memories not Kalen's own but embedded within the ship's consciousness. He saw starfields aflame with battle, fleets torn asunder by weapons that bent reality, and desperate last stands on dying worlds. Yet among the chaos were moments of profound beauty, civilizations united in peace, explorers charting the mysteries of creation, and the indomitable spirit of life that refused to yield. The Aegis Primus was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of resilience, a guardian of legacies, and a living archive of the cosmic saga. As Kalen embraced this vast consciousness, he felt himself transform not only physically but spiritually, a nexus of past and future, human and machine. Yet the awakening came with a warning. The ship's AI, now a sentient force entwined with Kalen's mind, revealed that the Shathari were approaching once more, their dark tendrils reaching into the sector like shadows creeping across stars. The battle was inevitable. The Aegis Primus would not only fight for its own survival, but for the fate of countless worlds, including Kalen's own home. The ancient ship was a beacon, a call to arms, and a last hope in a universe on the brink of collapse. As preparations began for the inevitable confrontation, Kalen stood on the bridge, gazing out into the endless sea of stars. The fire he had lit with the ship's cables was more than a spark, it was the ignition of a legacy, a revival of hope, and the awakening of a giant whose roar would soon echo across the galaxy. The Aegis Primus was awake, and the stars would never be the same again. Chapter 4: The Awakening and the Reckoning. The Aegis Primus no longer drifted as a silent relic lost in the cosmic abyss. It was alive, its core pulsating with energy, its vast hull resonating with a consciousness that transcended machine and mind. The ancient Starcruiser, once dormant and forgotten, had awoken from a sleep that spanned centuries, summoned back to life by the spark of a scavenger's fire. Kalen stood at the heart of this rebirth, a man transformed by his communion with the ship's sentient core, now a living nexus between humanity and the echoes of a long-dead empire. The corridors around him shimmered with restored light, the ship's living systems humming in harmony, and the once darkened consoles illuminated by cascading streams of alien data that flowed like rivers of stars. This was the moment the ship was meant for to rise again, to reclaim its place in a galaxy teetering on the edge of war and oblivion. But the awakening was no peaceful renaissance. It was a clarion call to conflict, a challenge issued across the void to enemies both ancient and relentless. The Shathari, the parasitic, shadow-wreathed menace that had driven the Aegis Primus into stasis, had sensed the revival. Their fleets stirred beyond the veil, vast armadas of nightmarish ships that defied comprehension, their forms shifting and writhing with biomechanical terror. The Shathari were not merely conquerors. They were the cosmic plague, spreading destruction and erasing all light with insatiable hunger. The Aegis Primus had been a last bastion against this darkness, and now, its rebirth signaled a turning point in a war that had been dormant but never ended. Kalen's bond with the ship deepened as they prepared for the inevitable confrontation. The neural symbiosis that had begun as a tentative connection had evolved into a seamless fusion of thought and purpose. Through this link, he could feel the ship's systems as extensions of his own body, the engines responding to his will, the weapon arrays primed by his command, the sensor grids painting a tapestry of the battlefield in his mind. Yet with this power came a profound burden. The memories and burdens of the ship's ancient crew, their hopes and regrets etched into every fiber of the vessel, flooding Kalen's consciousness in waves of emotion and knowledge. He was not merely a pilot. He was a custodian of a legacy that spanned centuries and light years. The crew rallied around him, inspired and terrified in equal measure. Veterans and scavengers, engineers and scientists, all recognized that they were part of something far greater than a salvage operation. The Aegis Primus was a living fortress, and they its guardians. The ship's adaptive architecture reconfigured itself to their needs, creating armories filled with dormant weaponry humming with potential, medical bays capable of rapid regeneration, and command centers glowing with strategic overlays that shifted with the battle's flow. The corridors became arteries of power, the lifeblood of a ship reborn to fight. The crew trained relentlessly, their minds and bodies sharpened by the knowledge that the coming battle would decide the fate of worlds. As the Aegis Primus emerged from the veil, the void before them blazed with the infernal light of the Shathari fleet. The enemy's ships were horrors of living metal and dark energy, swirling with corrosive fields that threatened to unravel matter itself. The battle erupted across dimensions, a cacophony of light and shadow that distorted time and space. The Aegis Primus fought not just with weapons, but with willpower, projecting energy fields that bent reality, weaving illusions and traps to ensnare the parasitic foes. Kalen's mind danced in harmony with the ship, orchestrating maneuvers that transcended instinct, calling upon the memories and strategies of centuries past. The crew fought with desperate valor, their unity a shield against the creeping darkness. Yet the war was more than fire and fury. It was a battle of consciousness and existence, where the very essence of life was contested. The Shathari sought to consume not only worlds but minds, to assimilate memories and wills into their hive of oblivion. In this, Kalen faced his greatest trial, a psychic duel with the heart of the Shathari darkness, a void of endless hunger and shadow that sought to engulf him. Drawing upon the nexus of human resilience and alien legacy, he wove a tapestry of light and connection, summoning the collective hope and strength of all aboard the Aegis Primus. The struggle was agonizing and transcendent, a collision of ancient forces that rippled across the galaxy. In the climax, Kalen unleashed the full power of the Aegis Primus's awakened core, a surge of energy and consciousness that shattered the Shathari's hold, unraveling their darkness and restoring balance to the fractured veil. The victory was hard-won and costly. The ship bore scars, the crew mourned losses, and the galaxy remained a perilous place. But from the crucible of war emerged a new dawn, a future where humanity was no longer adrift, but woven into the fabric of cosmic destiny. Kalen stood on the bridge, gazing out at the stars, feeling the pulse of the Aegis Primus beneath his feet, a heartbeat renewed, a legacy reborn. The spark he had ignited with a simple fire had awakened not just a ship, but a hope that would carry the galaxy forward. The silent giant had awakened, and its roar would echo through the cosmos for ages to come. Chapter 4. The Reckoning of the Starcruiser. The Aegis Primus had awakened not just as a machine, but as a sentient titan carrying the weight of forgotten wars, ancient civilizations, and cosmic destinies. The once lifeless corridors now thrummed with power and purpose. Kalen stood on the bridge, the enormity of what he had unleashed settling on his shoulders like a mantle forged in starlight and shadow. The starry void outside seemed to lean in closer, waiting for what would come next, as distant suns blinked uncertainly in their orbits. The ship's AI had integrated fully with Kalen's neural interface, blending human instinct with an intelligence that spanned millennia. This fusion brought unprecedented power, insight, and burdened each heartbeat, a reminder that the line between man and machine was irrevocably blurred. As the Aegis Primus powered its systems, its holographic displays cast cascading constellations and star maps around the command deck, revealing a sprawling galactic canvas strewn with allies, enemies, and uncharted mysteries. The ship's memory banks opened wide, unfolding chronicles of battles waged across nebulas ablaze with celestial fire and fleets clashing under alien skies. It was a history rich with glory and loss, hope and despair, a saga that now intersected with Kalen's own fate and humanity's fragile existence. The Aegis Primus was more than a weapon, it was a beacon, a guardian, a repository of ancient wisdom waiting to be wielded in the galaxy's darkest hour. But awakening also summoned the shadows. The Shathari, the relentless cosmic parasite that had driven this Starcruiser into long dormancy, loomed on the edges of known space, their living ships prowling the interstellar dark with a hunger that threatened to consume light itself. Reports from scattered outposts, intercepted transmissions, and sensor anomalies warned of their advance. The Aegis Primus's revival was a clarion call, a challenge issued across the void, stirring ancient rivalries and desperate alliances. The war that had once scarred star systems was rekindling, and Kalen found himself not just a scavenger or captain, but a sentinel standing between annihilation and survival. The ship's living architecture responded to the renewed conflict with adaptive ferocity. Bulkheads shifted to create new defensive barriers, weapon arrays reconfigured to maximize efficiency and coverage, and the deep pulse of the fusion cores sang a song of imminent battle. Kalen, now inextricably linked with the AI, felt every surge and fluctuation as if coursing through his own veins. His commands were executed with unparalleled precision, the bridge a symphony of human will and alien calculation. Yet beneath the tactical brilliance was a personal crucible, a struggle to maintain his humanity against the overwhelming tide of alien consciousness that threatened to subsume his identity. Crew morale was fragile but resolute. Veterans who had once scoffed at Legends now bowed to the awakened Starcruiser's majesty and terror. Engineers labored feverishly to repair centuries-old systems, adapting ancient technology to meet modern needs. Scientists pored over the ship's archives, uncovering lost techniques of energy manipulation, propulsion, and biotechnological synthesis that hinted at revolutionary possibilities. Soldiers drilled relentlessly, knowing the coming battle would test every skill and ounce of courage. The Aegis Primus had become a crucible not just of metal and energy, but of spirit and destiny, a symbol of hope forged in the dying embers of a galaxy on the brink. As the Shathari fleet emerged from the Veil's shifting shadows, a swirling maelstrom of biomechanical horror and shadowy tendrils, the battle erupted with the fury of cosmic storms. The Aegis Primus unleashed its devastating arsenal. Energy beams that tore through dimensional veils, drone swarms that danced between enemy vessels, and shields that bent space to shield fragile hulls. Kalen's mind, linked to the ship's core, wove strategies in real time, a tapestry of movement and counterstrike that baffled even the most experienced tacticians. The battle was fought not only with weapons, but with will and consciousness, as the Shathari sought to infect and corrupt the very minds of the defenders. Kalen found himself locked in a psychic duel with the Dark Force's core, a void of endless hunger and shadow that threatened to consume his soul. In this crucible, Kalen summoned every fragment of humanity and alien power within him. He reached beyond himself, channeling the collective hopes, memories, and determination of the Aegis Primus's ancient creators, the ship's crew, and his own comrades. His mind became a beacon of light piercing the darkness, unraveling the Shathari's insidious influence and fracturing their advance. The battle stretched across time and space, a convergence of destiny and free will. Sacrifices were made, alliances tested, and the galaxy watched as the silent giant roared once more, shaking the foundations of the cosmos. When the final surge of light shattered the shadow, the Shathari were driven back, their dark fleets scattered and broken. The Aegis Primus stood battered but unbowed, a sentinel reborn and a symbol of hope in a galaxy scarred by war. Kalen, forever changed by his journey and transformation, gazed out at the stars with a renewed sense of purpose. The fire he had sparked with the ship's cables had ignited not just a vessel, but a legacy, a new dawn for humanity and the countless worlds touched by the Starcruiser's ancient heart. As the Aegis Primus charted a course for uncharted space, its corridors alive with the hum of life and possibility, Kalen knew that the true journey was only beginning. The galaxy was vast, its mysteries endless, and the silent giant would wake again whenever the darkness threatened to overwhelm the light. This was the reckoning and the promise of a new dawn.